Increasingly, it's going to be the court systems and our state attorney general's offices that are going to save us from the mess America is in because of who is in the White House. This is Carole Copeland Thomas, and I want to talk to you about a special edition of Conversations with Carole, where 16 attorneys general have come together to give guidance to businesses on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility employment initiatives in the workplace and why they are legal. Buckle your seatbelt and get ready for the podcast that will take you on a special journey designed to elevate and empower your cross-cultural appreciation for communities around the world. Hello, I'm Carole Copeland Thomas. I'm your host of Conversations with Carole, the weekly show that connects culture with collaboration and community. Welcome aboard. Thanks so much for listening or watching to my podcast today. This order was actually announced on February 13th, 2025. We're about a week plus out from that particular date. And it's where 16 of the top attorneys general in the United States have come together talking about the significance, the importance, and the legitimacy of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. They have said that the president's order to attempt to bully employers into eliminating lawful policies that we know reduce complaints of illegal discrimination, increase a company's bottom line, and improve workforce culture and consumer experience, said my Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, here in Massachusetts. She says, I am proud to partner with my AG colleagues, Attorney General colleagues, to empower businesses and encourage them to be courageous in maintaining their lawful diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility programs. Now, we're seeing time and time again since President Trump has issued more than 70 executive orders slashing budgets, destroying and dismantling diversity, equity, and inclusion, and doing a number of other things where it is unconstitutional in many cases, unlawful in many cases. But the bullying, this language that Attorney General Campbell has said, the bullying is what is pushing people to comply with his orders. And I am just standing up and shouting and saying thank you for these attorney generals who have come together to say, no, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to give you their names and who they are, and then we're going to go on and just talk about how important this is. In Illinois, it was actually co-hosted by Attorney General Andrea Campbell here in Massachusetts and Illinois' Kwame Raoul. They co-hosted this particular, co-sponsored this particular bill, not a bill, but an announcement. And then he brought together the following 14 AGs from Arizona: Chris Mays; California, Rob Bonta; Connecticut, William Tong; Delaware, Kathy Jennings; Hawaii, Ann Lopez; Maine, Aaron Fry; Maryland, Anthony Brown; Minnesota, Keith Ellison, he has ties here in Boston; Nevada, Aaron Ford; New Jersey, Matthew Platkin; New York, Letitia James. She's my shero. She's done so many great things to keep things in line and to bring the law into play with all the corruption that's taking place with this administration and the leader of this administration. Rhode Island, Peter Nerona; Oregon, Ellen Rosenblum; in Vermont, Charity Clark. Hats off to all of them. They banded together to put this particular measure in place. So let me give you some of the highlights of this. I'm going to read in part and then I'm going to interpret. I don't want to make this too long, but when you look at what they've done, this is a guidance in terms of concerns for the employers, because what has happened is that the Trump administration they have issued an executive order making diversity, equity, and inclusion, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility illegal. Importantly, the coalition's guidance informs companies. This is a guidance document that they put together, that efforts to seek and support diversity, equity, inclusive, and accessible workplaces are not illegal. And the federal government cannot prohibit these efforts in the private sector through executive order. So they are pretty much saying that what these companies are doing across the country, as they are having Black History Month, as we are in the month of February, as they have chief diversity officers, as they are putting forth diversity training programs, or in their mission statement mentioning the words diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, or whatever they're doing that incorporates and encompasses DEI, is in fact legal. It also is expressing organizations, individuals' right for free speech. So the First Amendment is guaranteeing the importance and the validity of DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. I actually have on a DEI sweatshirt that I have created called DEI is in my DNA, and you'll be seeing that an awful lot. What they're saying is that don't buy the hokey doke in the White House, that what is currently happening is in fact legal. And obviously, we know that what happened in 2023 with the higher education announcement with the Supreme Court that struck down affirmative action is now being leveraged by people like Edward Bloom, who brought this to the Supreme Court along with Asian parents, saying that affirmative action was illegal and that they were being discriminated against. One thing led to another. And so the Supreme Court edict from June of 2023 has been bastardized into an expanded interpretation of DEI and its illegality in the private sector. So these folks, these individuals like Blum, I'm sure Richard Spencer, he's a white supremacist, and other people like that, Robbie Starbuck, at the top of the list, they are looking at companies and organizations that they can sue, that they can then say, you have to dismantle your diversity program and your diversity initiative because it is against the law and it's discriminatory. And these attorney generals are saying, no, no, no. You need to continue with what you're doing because what you are doing is lawful and it is legal and it is constitutional. So, with the 70 executive orders that have been issued so far, 70 plus, a lot of them are going to end up in the court systems, and attorney generals across the country are going to have to come together, band together, coalesce together, looking at ways that they can protect the orders, the operational dynamics, the programs, the initiatives, certainly as it revolves around diversity, equity, inclusion, and their inclusiveness of it. And so they say a number of things. They say for decades, federal courts have consistently recognized that diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility policies do not amount to impermissible discrimination. In fact, employment discrimination laws generally require employers to pay attention to the impact of policies and practices have on different groups in order to avoid and limit liability from unlawful conduct. So again, they're looking at this from a legal perspective. They're looking at this in terms of how it has benefited people, and most importantly, what it's doing to advance inclusion across the country. It says over the last 5 years, more than 285,000 discrimination complaints were filed by employees in the coalition states, all these 16 states put together, more than 4,700 of which were filed in Massachusetts, my state. In their guidance, the coalition reminds businesses that state and federal laws prohibit discrimination in the workplace on the basis of race, sex, national origin, and other protected characteristics. In order to effectively avoid liability from discrimination, employers must take steps to proactively prevent and address discrimination, including by identifying and remediating policies and practices that have an unlawful impact on current and prospective employees. Decades of research and data demonstrate that properly developed and implemented diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility initiatives help prevent unlawful discrimination and ensure that discriminatory conduct is promptly identified, reported, and addressed when it does occur. So it just goes on. They give more information, they give examples in terms of how important it is, the significance of it, and how it needs to be protected across the country because, as they say, diversity is not illegal. Equity, which is probably one of the salient important points of diversity when you're looking at it in terms of who needs more supportive resources to make sure that we are operating on an equitable or an equal playing field. Equity is really, really important. I'm probably going to do a whole podcast on that. And inclusion, and the other words, accessibility, which deals with those who are in the disability category, etc. How everybody can play their role in our society from the point of view of potential being reached because people are valued. That's basically what they're saying. So if I were to look at real quickly 10 points, 10 talking points about why this announcement, this guidance that was given on February 13th is so important, here they are. Number one, the legal standing of DEI initiatives. Again, we've just talked about the fact that it remains legal in terms of operating with DEI policies and practices in place. Number two, it debunks the myths about DEI versus illegal hiring preferences or this slam on DEI hires. Oh, if the person is black or brown or a woman in many cases, there has to be a DEI hire. They have just let go one of the highest generals in the military, General Brown, and a corresponding high executive in the Navy because she's a woman. And so now the banter is, oh, they were DEI hires anyway. Well, first of all, I hope they find that it's, I hope they will find a reason to bring these two individuals back. But again, this whole thing about, oh, they're just DEI hires. Well, if you look at who are now being confirmed as cabinet appointees from the Secretary of Defense to the FBI director to the director of Health and Human Services, none of them are qualified. None of them are qualified. So the hypocrisy of what is taking place versus the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility are staggering. The hypocrisy is staggering. And what this administration wants to do is to normalize hypocrisy in the face of all the corruption that is taking place between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Thirdly, workplace discrimination. The reality, over 285,000 discriminatory complaints in coalition states show why proactive DEI efforts are necessary. I just read that long piece about that. Number four, the business case for DEI, which has always been the premise. I've been in this business, 38 years or whatever. And always we go back to the business. It just makes sense from a business point of view to promote and advance diversity, equity, inclusion because it is a profit-making and productive generated solution for a lot of organizations. Number 5, best practices for inclusive hiring, strategies like standardized evaluations, panel interviews, and accessible recruitment methods can be used to reduce bias. They've been used successfully. They will continue to be used successfully because they work. Number 6, retention through inclusion. The impact of the employee resource groups, which are very popular around the country, mentorship programs, and inclusive training on workplace morale have had a positive benefit in terms of DEI. These are all the things that this administration, with this executive order, wants to remove, get rid of, destroy in place of these highly unqualified loyalists who are being put in place, certainly in the federal government, and they want it to continue on in private industry. Number 7, the federal executive order and employee rights, clarifying the limits of federal authority over private sector DEI initiatives. Again, this is where it's the big grab. You start at the Supreme Court. There's an affirmative action ruling that was really narrowly limited to higher education from an admissions point of view in terms of race. That now has been bastardized, and you want to expand it so that the federal policies will have total implication on the private sector, which is not the way to do it. Number 8, DEI as a talent attraction strategy. That's it. How inclusive workplaces attract top talent and reduce turnover. That's what every organization wants to do. They want to keep their best and brightest, regardless of what color they happen to be. They want to attract their best and brightest. And diversity, equity, inclusion is a great way to do it. Number 9, economic growth through diversity. Statements from business leaders affirming DEI as a driver of economic success and innovation. One example of that is Costco's. I was there last night because I will be honoring them on March 13th of 2025. If you're listening in the future, they will be honored because their shareholders started off with the board of directors, came together and almost unanimously fended off a right-wing group that wanted them to stop and eliminate all of their DEI practices. They said, no, we're not going to do it because it makes money for us. It's productive, and for our thousands of employees, it is the way for us to go. So they said, nope. Thank you very much. We are continuing to advance the cause of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's Costco's, the big box store. They sell food products, other items, etc. I was there last night talking with one of their managers. The place was packed, and I salute them, and I will be taking out a renewed Costco's membership in the next week or so. And then number 10, next steps for business. Practical action organizations can take, practical actions that organizations can take to strengthen their DEI efforts despite political and legal challenges. I'm not going to lie, it's going to be difficult over the next 4 years. I don't even know how we're going to get through the next 6 months because of what's being done and what's being destroyed in terms of all kinds of measures, initiatives, firing federal employees left and right, leaving us vulnerable, wanting to privatize the weather system, wanting to privatize the post office, all these kind of measures that, in terms of the post office, it is constitutional to have a post office. So I don't know how that's going to be privatized. But just all of these ridiculous and overreaching executive orders that in many cases are either unconstitutional or illegal, including the one in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. These 16 brave, wonderful attorney generals have gotten together and said, nope, hold it. Let's give you guidance, you companies and organizations in our respective states, and hopefully it applies to the rest of the country too, in terms of what you can and cannot do and the benefits of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. It's going to be states coming together, attorney generals coming together and collaborating, other legal forces, nonprofit civic activist organizations like the NAACP and the ACLU, and most importantly, people coming together, protesting, calling your congresspersons, as I've done and will be doing weekly, writing letters to these same individuals. It's going to take that collective effort coming together to stop this madness. And as we have seen, hats off to the 16 attorney generals across the country, including my attorney general and others, and who also the attorney general in Illinois. Illinois and Massachusetts co-sponsored this particular guidance for businesses about the significance and the importance for you moving forward with DEIA and not ending it. This is Carole Copeland Thomas. We're going to be talking about this for a long, long time. Get out there, operate with the manner of citizenship where you and all of us collectively can make a difference. Thank you for listening to Conversations with Carole. Spread the word and tell friends and colleagues that this podcast is tailor-made for them. Make sure you subscribe, and we welcome your comments and reviews on your favorite podcast platform. Visit us at CaroleCopelandThomas.com and listen to all of the episodes and learn about my speaking services there. Thanks again, and we'll see you back next week for an exciting new show. See you soon.